The year's coming to an end, and of course, people will now ask you, where are we going with this organization? Where is this company going? Where is this project going? Where is this strategy going? And that's exactly where you have to tell them what to do. The question now is, as a leader, how do you handle long-term planning? I received quite a number of emails where people said, I had a couple of experiences with my leaders and wasn't too great. Some of them did really well, and they ask, is this the right way? And some of them I really could confirm, yes, it's done very well. Others, however, not so much. And the question is, how does long-term leadership work? How to lead, and especially leadership and long-term, how to deliver excellent leadership regarding long-term planning. That's our topic of this week's podcast. Hello and welcome. If you're listening or watching on YouTube or listening to me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other platform, hello and welcome. We are getting straight into it. As soon as we talk about long-term planning, one thing which happened last year was I was at an event where I spoke and there was the board. And one thing I didn't know, but I saw it because I sat in the audience afterwards, the CEO was talking together with the board on a panel, and then they presented, and I'm not making this up, last year they presented the Agenda 2040. They wanted to present where the company is heading in, well, a bit more than 15 years. And of course, immediate laughter in the audience, because often people think, yeah, I like to have the same fortune teller skills to be able to tell the next 15 years in advance. We probably can't tell the next 5 years in advance, at least not properly, and especially not only based on opinions. So the situation is people are uncertain about the future. If you tell them, I don't know what happens, we have to see, they will be uncertain about anything. However, if you tell them, well, I know everything, they'll probably ask you, how do you know? And if you don't have a great answer to that, then there's nothing else. There's basically nothing as an answer. When you can't answer this question, it's getting nasty reasonably quickly. So it is very important that you deal with the future and these uncertainties pretty quickly. The question now is, with these uncertainties, what should you do? When we deal with uncertainties, you of course can just guess, and that's what many people do. However, as soon as you guess, people will always counter with a question and say, how do you get to that point of view? And then it's getting difficult from there. The main point here is often as soon as you claim anything, and we have way too many leaders who are very confident, typical overconfidence bias, and this overconfidence bias leads to you thinking you know it all. And especially when you are in a very high position of power, people often do not dare to speak up, especially when you have shown certain negative leadership behaviors towards criticism or people questioning your decisions. You will probably say, who are you and why are you questioning my authority? Not you in the future for a career. And that is, of course, a massive problem. No one has the crystal ball to know the future. However, people still think, and they have a right to get told where does this organization actually want to develop. And there are solutions to this issue. When we get to the solutions, number one is always, which methods do you apply? And the first method people often have is experience. And experience is very, very valuable. I come from the generation when I started working in Germany, my first job after uni, unemployment was reasonably high, economy was in crisis, lots of cost due to the reunification of Germany was the end of the 90s. And many people were afraid if they have their job in 2 years' time or in 6 months' time. So they thought, what could we do to predict the future? And they relied on experience. However, the main issue and the main problem was that to get more jobs on the market, the government gave a tax benefit, a very, very favorable tax regime on sending people into retirement early. So organizations could send people into retirement early, and this means people from the age of 50. So they made an offer to many people in my organization where I worked back in the days, and unfortunately in my department, anyone took it. Absolutely everyone. Everyone took it. And the problem then, of course, is we suddenly had projects where we sat there with all the young people, with all the young folks. And I remember one project where I was co-leader, and I was sitting in the round saying, "Look, we are all basically between 21 and 28 here. Anyone has an idea what's going on because I don't." And no one else had. So what happened was they spoke again to the people in retirement, brought them back in on tremendously expensive contracts as a consultant. And that, of course, was not what is expected to be done when you are a leader. Always be aware you need to have experience on board. However, one of the methods you also have to look into is professional forecasting. And that is something which you do not do. That is something which you do not do in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet within 10 minutes. When you say we need professional forecasting, when you say we need professional forecasting, it simply means you need to have professionals who are data science experts, or at least data science qualified. It doesn't need to be a university degree, although that might help. There are other methods of qualification. Very rarely someone just read themselves into data science. That is almost impossible, except when you have a certain talent for it. The professional forecasting is extremely important because that gives you, and stochastic forecasting, when you want to talk about stochastic forecasting means you take probabilities and then look into the future. And that look into the future is extremely important when you want to make decisions in favor of a product or against the product, in favor of a market entry or against the market entry, in favor of hiring new salespeople or against hiring new salespeople, or even laying people off. Professional forecasting is something which needs to be done. However, you probably know when you are professional forecasting, and then you sit there with the sales team, a member of the sales team, and you ask them, so let's talk about goal setting. What do you think is going to be your goal for next year? And their answer will be immediately, the economy is in crisis. Nothing's working. I think 50% of my goal from this year, maximum, probably less. And that is, of course, the problem. You have to, and these are two aspects now, do two things: manage expectations and master the art of the negotiation. And I can tell you, it's not reading the book The Art of the Deal. Managing expectations means you have to manage that sometimes people will be disappointed. And I know when you disappoint people, the atmosphere in the office might not be too great for the next couple of days. And it doesn't feel too nice when you enter the coffee room and suddenly anyone stops talking because the leader entered the room. However, I can tell you this will happen sooner or later. And if you are unable or unwilling to handle that, you should reconsider if leadership is really for you. Of course, I would really appreciate if someone knows a method that they always appreciate what you say, but there are moments where you have to make unpopular decisions, and of course, it will show. Manage the expectations. And in addition to that, always master negotiations, because as soon as you set a certain expectation, people start to negotiate. And one aspect is extremely important here. You cannot sit there as a leader and say, I say, you obey. There is always room for negotiation. If you do not leave room for negotiation, people will always say there is no employee participation in the organization, and that makes everything worse from there. So be sure that you leave room for negotiations. If you now want to implement all of this, very important. If you now want to implement all of this, step number one is, of course, check what is the experience you have on board. When you now realize you do not have the experience on board that you need at the moment, then you need to talk to an agency or to freelancers. I just talked to one of my clients. They just got an external manager in as a CFO, an interim manager, and that person had tremendous value within the first 100 days. Probably within the first 60 days, they managed more than other managers did within a whole year. So the experience is either there or you have to pay to get the expertise in. You cannot, you then have to pay to get the experience in. There is no fast forward for experience. No one, of course, some people worked more, some people work less. And as you know from my podcast, I'm probably on the end of I like to work a bit more. However, the point here is the experience is something you cannot read in a book. The experience is nothing you can just write down and think you have it. The experience is nothing you can make up because people will just put two questions forward and you can't answer them properly and you lose all your social legitimation. No one is going to follow you in the future. Experience is something you have or you do not have. And of course, when you work more, you will be experienced way sooner than others. That's what I always tell people. Anyone has the right to work only 15 hours a week. However, don't complain that the people with 30 or 40 hours a week or even more have more experience and probably get the promotion a bit quicker than you did. So the experience is step number one. Step number two is the expertise. If you talk about data science, you need professionally qualified people. May it be certificates from universities, may it be a degree, may it be both, may it be practical experience or vocational training on the matter. However, you need professional expertise. Someone who simply thinks, I know it all by gut feeling, is no one who is going to help you in the future. And just to be clear, we all know that one case where gut feeling was the right decision over the data. We all know that one case where the data was probably not very well calculated, but the gut feeling of a manager saved the situation. We all know that one situation. However, N equals 1 is no evidence, as Frank Caspides from Harvard Business School tends to say. You need to be aware of the fact that expertise is something you have. In the long run, the expertise will always win. So you need both experience and expertise. And by the way, why in the long run this always wins? You know this from sports. A team from League 7 can always win against a Champions League team once. Probably you know this from cup games, FA Cup or the German DFB Pokal or any kind of cup challenge, or the World Cup. Suddenly the underdog beats the world champion. Yes, this might happen once. When you let them play 10 games against each other, 9 out of 10, or at least 8 out of 10 of these games will be in favor of the team with the experience and the expertise. It's led by science, facts, proof, and evidence. And that leads me to my last point: deliver the facts. When you want to do long term planning and you stick to gut feeling, people will rightfully so ask you, how do you get to that conclusion? And if you don't have a great answer, people will say, I'm not believing a single word you say. And by the way, my opinion is this one. And why is my opinion not the same value than yours? And when you then say, I'm a leader, you're not, that's why my opinion is worth more. That is where everything goes downhill very, very quickly. So be sure that you always deliver the facts. If you do everything, as we said right here, so you really look into the future, you deal with it, you know the methods, you have professional forecasting, you manage all the expectations and negotiate well with experience and expertise and deliver on the matter, the promise, and the facts, then everything will turn out very well. And I wish you all the best doing so. And when you now say, I'd like to discuss something that's a bit something, I have a couple of questions on my mind. Feel free to contact me anytime. So first, when you watch me on YouTube here, feel free to leave a like here, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment here. Thank you very much for doing so. When you, of course, listen to me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, feel free to review the whole thing, 5 stars. Thank you very much for doing so, and recommend this channel on any kind of way you can do, friends, colleagues, anywhere. Share it on social media. Thank you very much for doing so as well. One aspect which we always offer on top is the YouTube Shorts. These are the leadership tips. We have leadership tips, more than 100 already online. And these will be updated frequently with always current affairs and up-to-date matters from the leadership space. As the name says, YouTube Shorts only available on YouTube, so it pays off when you subscribe to my channel to put a little bell in there so you get a short update, a short notification on your message as soon as this update happens. Of course, you can also follow me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or go to my website, nb-networks.biz, and then you see what I do for a living. When you now say, I'd like to contact you, but in private, not in public, because it's probably an inquiry or something. nb@nb-networks.com is my email address. So when you email me, you can email me anything. You can either say, hey, we need a trainer, speaker, coach, consultant, mentor, project interim management. Happy to deliver that. That's my business. I do for more than 20 years. You can, of course, also say, hey, I just have a question. Let's have a chat. Of course, let's just do that. I'm open for absolutely anything, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And by the way, thank you very much to anyone listening. We now have already way more than 100,000 listeners here, which is amazing. I started this whole thing 5 years ago and never thought it goes anywhere near that. So thank you very much for doing so. I'm very happy to discuss absolutely anything. And I really say thank you for the respectful discussions we had in the last couple of weeks. When you now say, what about live sessions? Yes, we have live sessions. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com and you put your email address in there, then you receive, no worries, one email every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content, ad-free guarantee, and there's lots of content in there. Full access to all the podcasts, no paywall. Full access to all the articles, no paywall, unlike in other places. So, and by the way, it's available in the English and German language, so feel free to join there. And of course, in this email, which you receive on Wednesday morning, you see the date, the time, and the link to join for the live session. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there as well. Of course, you can also connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me on Instagram, like me on Facebook, or simply subscribe to my channel on YouTube. I'm open to absolutely anything. The most important thing, however, is apply what you heard, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive changes that you obviously want to see in your organization. I wish you all the best doing so. Feel free to contact me anytime. I will answer any message within 24 hours or less. And at the end of this video cast, as well as the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.